Hey everyone, Temporal here, and for this session we are going to be doing a map review on Lijiang Tower. We're going to start here with Control Center, and as you can see I have pre-drawn our lanes, which you can think of as the primary lanes on Control Center, at least initially, are going to be down main here, up here through up here through server room, and then over here along coast. You do, of course, get branching lanes, as you can see here through white room. That is especially relevant for the first fight, as well as a branching lane out of server room over to take this high ground here. But before we get further into this, if you guys are enjoying the content, please do drop a like, consider subscribing if you're not already subscribed. And if you guys are throwing up comments, I absolutely encourage you to do that. Throw those up in chat. I will address those at the end of the presentation, which will be about 20 to 30 minutes here. Or if you want me to engage with your question immediately, I can be bribed. Super chats are right there. But as we get into this, we can see we've got our initial 3 lanes, we've got our break-off points, and we really have to think, okay, well, we're on this map. What is this map? And the answer to what is this map is this tends to be a brawl map. And why is that? Well, a couple things lead to that. What we could really get into is there are a lot of enclosed spaces on this map. I can erase that now. There are a lot of enclosed spaces on this map. White room, relatively enclosed space. Yes, there's an opening here, sure. Server room, pretty darn enclosed. Path down main hallway here. Yeah, even though this is a relatively long sightline, it's pretty enclosed, and we don't have the easiest transferability between, say, this main path and this coast path. Couple doors, but like it's pretty isolated. So obviously Poke doesn't like that. Dive doesn't like being able to not jump between lanes. Similar stuff here, where you've got a fair amount of time away from your other lanes there. But why we see the open that we do here, which tends to be a brawl open, specifically we tend to be looking at a brawl comp that's maybe a little something like this. Doesn't have to be exactly these heroes, but generally you're going to see something looking like this with the Junkrat Sim or similar heroes going up here for the first fight. And the reason that you're going to get that is going to be that it's simply better than your other options. When you look at this first fight, there isn't time for someone to do a great rotation up here. They're going to be super late to the fight, and even though this seems powerful, it doesn't have any influence over a fight that happens here. And if someone does a rotation to here, it's not actually a very good angle compared to main, or compared to white room here. So if people went through white room and someone else went here, maybe you put a McCree post out here, a Sigma post out here, whatever, your angle isn't actually very big between here and here, and the team that has the shorter range, more powerful, say, Junkrat and Symmetra here, when you've set up a McCree out here, is going to kind of win this fight before this angle becomes relevant, because it's not a very big angle. It's still mostly just forward. The Rhine Shield, the DM, all those tools, the Maywall, all of those tools do a good job of just going, yeah, we don't really care about that. Your off angle isn't very big. We'd rather have the stronger brawl power to just win this. Similar thing with this coast rotation. It mostly takes too long for heroes it would be relevant for. Sure, a Tracer could get here fast, a Hammonds could get here fast, but they then can't really play in a way that makes this angle relevant unless they go here, at which point they might as well have just gone main, and then yes, they could go in here, but not the best thing in the world. They certainly don't want to get caught in here, etc. So that's sort of why we see this opening fight over this white room here. Because, hey, this angle isn't super relevant. The other rotations are too slow to be relevant. The high ground one, while being super slow, has nothing. And we run into this situation where if you go main, I haven't really answered, if you go main, why would that, not be better? If you go main, you can more quickly spread out, as we'll cover. Main is pretty good once you have it for controlling lots of lanes. It sort of gets its own sub lanes, which is great. The problem that you run into is a main push loses pretty easily to a main plus white room push, because now you actually do have pretty good angles, pretty meaningfully open angles against main, and this main thing, even if they're a brawl comp, can't quickly win the fight against a partial main team that's over here. So they have to push in, and then they lose to the angle that's to be had. So that's why this first fight tends to be brawl. That's why brawl gets run on this map, and why this first fight tends to happen here. Which, we definitely care about that. That's going to be like, okay, that determines why people are running Brawl there. But then we get into, okay, what happens here? And there's a couple tricks you can play to not make it like this, but we'll sort of get into them. I'd say the most relevant trick for going, hey, this fight around this fight would be if you're both running Brawl at each other, you can end up in a situation where you fake push a Brawl, you actually push a Brawl that's missing someone. Maybe you bring yourself a McCree, you accept that he's going to be late to the party. Maybe actually you go like that. You accept that your McCree is going to be late to the party. You push in like this. You pretend that you're fighting over White Room. You let yourself get pushed back a little bit by the other team. And then your McCree, your Soldier, your Ash, whatever that's showing up late actually does have pretty good shots into the other team that has advanced to push you and can potentially get a pick from the side. But mostly, this is the standard fight that's happening. And this is sort of a little bit, I wouldn't say of a trick play, but it does sort of depend on the other team not recognizing what's happening. If they do recognize what's happening, they will push super hard and just force the fight in here where your McCree isn't relevant. Anyway, wanted to cover that little extra aspect there. So that's sort of the first fight. The first fight is usually going to be a brawl over this. Again, if your team doesn't understand, your team on ladder picks dive, your team on ladder picks poke, that does not mean you're doomed. The other team is likely to make mistakes as well. And as long as you understand what some of these other positions are, like taking this over here, like understanding, okay, can I get more control over the point? There are things that you can do. You can take these flank routes, etc. So then we get into sort of retakes, because that's the nature of King of the Hill. First fight is different than follow-up fights, and what happens in these situations is we have, let's say, control as a brawl team. If we won cleanly as a brawl team, and the other team is not running Symmetra, we're going to hold a forward choke. This is what you do in King of the Hill. In King of the Hill, the point is not your default hold. If you won and you didn't lose people that have to run back, or your people are mostly back, you actually like to get yourself a forward hold, because even if the opponents try to out-rotate you, you should still be in a situation where you can relatively easily go, hey, not a big deal. We'll go ahead and even if the opponents try to go, hey, we're going to rotate over here, this is a forever rotation that's going to take them an eternity, and you will beat them back to point. So no big deal. You may even beat them into a place where they go through server room, for example, and you can actually go, nope, you're going through server room, and now we have a good choke set up here too. So you take this, you don't super hard hold it if they're starting to break it. If you're in any danger, you pull back, just take the spam value and rotate back to point. That would be the standard way to play most King of the Hill maps. But Control Center is a little different. And what makes Control Center a little different is you're probably going to see Symmetra on the other team as well. And if there's a Symmetra on an attacking team, you have to respect the geometry of Control Center specifically. And what that means is, as we look at Control Center, I drew sort of the macro points for the map in general, but what we haven't covered is, well, here's a sight line for once you have points. Here's a sight line for once you have points. And let's say roughly here-ish is a sight line for once you have points. Something along this, where we've still established 3 lanes. You could put it up here and have it go like that if you want. But what this generally means with sort of the most meta composition right now, and this guide should be somewhat timeless. It should be somewhat meta-proof. We're going somewhat heavily into Symmetra, but even if she's not in play, we're covering how to play this when she's not. You can put people like your Reinhardt down this lane, like your Symmetra down this lane, maybe throw your BAP back here where he's still got this similar sightline to your Reinhardt, your Lucio up here where he's protecting it, and then maybe your Junkrat spamming this down here. Your Junkrat obviously spamming this V here. So we look at that, and this is very hard to break into. This is stronger than most points. Most points in Overwatch, the point itself, the objective itself is on low ground. It's not the greatest. Volskaya would be an example of this. The point itself is a very poor place to defend from. That's not super true on Control Center. Yes, you want to spread out and defend around it, but the point has some nice cover, and there's some really good stuff around it that doesn't require being way off of it. It doesn't require you to take a forward hold. Runes would be another example. The point itself is super low low ground and really not very good, and you would much prefer to hold either of the chokes in front of it. That's not really true here. Like, don't get me wrong, the chokehold up here is good. It's good. The chokehold here is strong. We like it, but we're pretty strong even holding from just around point here. And because it's pretty strong from holding just around point here, you now have to be more worried than you would on most comps of a sim TP past strat. So you end up in a situation where if you are defending against these guys and they go, hey, you're defending, you're trying to hold the choke, you've got yourself a Reinhardt, you have yourself maybe a BAP, maybe a Lucio, you're trying to spam it, whatever, and the attacking team with their Symmetra goes, nope, we're going to go ahead and I'm missing someone here. There's our Junkrat. We're going to go ahead and do a TP past you strat, and we're now past you. Holy cow, if they now beat you to the point, they're going to be able to spread out very quickly and go take exactly those positions that we talked about, and that is going to be very bad for you. They're likely to flip the point on you. If they don't flip the point on you, you're going to have to feed pretty hard into angles that they are very quickly able to establish. And that's why Symmetra is a little weird and this point is a little weird, and that you've specifically got to respect that. So again, if there's a Symmetra on the other team, we're potentially going to go, no, we're going to hold point. If there's not a Symmetra on the other team in this brawl v brawl type thing that we usually see, we're looking to hold ourselves a bit back further here. Okay. Obviously, some of the good paths for alternate retake paths here, we covered the defense, what defense looks like in terms of why you control point or why you control forward. Standard retake path of going, hey, let's just go mid. It's okay. It's okay to go mid, especially if you can do the sim TP play on them and they're holding wrong. Obviously, if they're holding mid, they're close holding on you and you don't like it, you absolutely go, hey, let's take our flank routes. You can do this flank route, but they're probably going to adjust. So a flank route up through high ground takes a bit longer, can have value, or you can leave a hit scan behind up here, which definitely has value. You can also send someone up over here, go, let's send our hit scan up here, let's send a flanker along here, let's send our core through here. That's going to work, as long as your flanker can touch to drag them back to make your hit scan relevant. That's going to work okay. This high ground is actually pretty good high ground for attacking, just slow to get to, really slow to get to, but it's not so good for defending. And why it's not so good for defending, why it's not considered a privileged position or a power position like you might on some maps, is because for the defenders, it's kind of meh. The defenders, even if they're holding point or if they're holding here, want to be able to spam down the retake lanes, but that isn't really an option if they've put a meaningful poke DPS up here, be that a Kree, a Soldier, a Widow, like anything up here can't really do that. That said, what is better and what doesn't really get utilized often enough is the ability, when you have control, to go, hey, let's put something up here, a Kree, a Soldier, a Widow, whatever. Let's put something to play around this, because this sightline can absolutely spam that path. And if you're over here, it can even spam that path. Are you going to have some fall off? Yeah, you're potentially going to have some fall off. But this is pretty darn good. It gives you control of this left side of the point, like we talked about. You have a mega to work with. Yes, a flanker can potentially come up and push up outside on you, but that's not the end of the world. Your team can still throw you the support that you'd expect. This doesn't really get used as often as it should in either ladder or pro play for either the defending team or for some of these trap plays that we talked about earlier. This is pretty good. The last thing that this is really good for is we've mostly talked about Brawl v Brawl here, and that's because that's primarily what happens on Control Center. If you do want to force dive, though, what becomes hyper relevant is there is not good access to this. So your ability to go, hey, our Sombra can hack this, our Winston can hop up here whenever he wants, our Diva can hop up here whenever she wants. Whereas Brawl teams have to go, let's go out and around and go over here to get to you, or they have to send up their Diva with limited support, or they have to send up their Lucio with limited support. Don't get me wrong, there's absolutely a boop threat, but the ability to play around this while of course still playing your angles, still playing to hit from multiple sides, is one of the things that can give dive a chance. I still would say most of the time, unless dive is tuned highly and brawl is tuned weakly, this is something where you're going to be looking at a brawl map. Okay, So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to night market. And let's move on to night market here, which we can do by going like this. Whee! We're trying. We're trying. Okay, we've found ourselves a night market. And let's slide on over to night market here. So, as we get to night market, we once again need to think about lanes. Lanes are really important for understanding an Overwatch. If you guys get nothing from this map series other than understanding the lanes, that would still be very good for most viewers. So what we look at, we've of course got a standard lane that goes up there or potentially goes in there, sure. We also have ourselves one rather obvious flank lane that would be, let's go over here. We can keep going, we can turn in, we can turn in. Either one of those is going to be fine. And then we have a third lane. I'm going to draw this lane going up here for high ground. Sometimes it will do that. The reality is this is something to be aware of this high ground here. But most of the time, the real third lane that you're going for is this circle out here. And then you can turn in here. You can turn in here, or you can explore onto the other sides of the map or even go deeper. You get the idea here. So these are the lanes that we're primarily interested in. Okay, primary lanes, when we're not talking about control of the map, something good to understand, cool. We like it, we get it. Nothing too wild here. Then we move on to what happens for first fight. And first fight for night market, the general favored strategy is a sim TP rush. And again, your comp doesn't have to look exactly like this comp. By no means does it have to look like this comp, but it's pretty common to see a sim TP take a team into the sort of top of the window here, not the doorway, but the door above the doorway, there's a window. And it's pretty common to just try to rush this and go, hey, we're going to rush it. We're going to do this. Brawl is inherently favored. Brawl is inherently strong when it controls a choke that the other team has to push into. So it's trying to get here first. And then some of these things like the Winston are because you're expecting another brawl with Sim. Diva isn't as great into a Sim who has her ramping up beam, so you instead take more brawl power with Winston. As an example, you don't have to. You also don't have to run the Doomfist. There's good reasons too, specifically for retakes especially, but you can do this, and then you're set up to hold as a brawl team here. And this is very common even on ladder. This is not exclusive to organized play. This is common. I've tried to keep most of these map guides somewhat or highly relevant to ladder, and these are strats that are common enough on ladder that it's worth understanding this SimTP play is going to happen. Well, what do you do? If a team is going to run this SimTP play and go, hey, we've taken control, we've got this here, you can match them. You can run your own comp and do the same thing and then just coin flip for, well, who's going to win? Who's going to get control of the point there? Yeah, you could do that. And then if you win, great. If they win, not so great, but so be it. Or you could go, we're going to play something else. We're going to play a more pokey dive comp, maybe a dive comp heavily leaning poke, maybe a poke comp that's a little bit mobile, whatever you want to call it, however you want to think about it, but something that is looking to exhaust this team is the other option of what you could play. Even in first fight, you'd play it mostly the same way you'd play a retake if you were running up against a brawl team like this. And most of the time, that is what you'll see. So, how does that work? Well, before we cover how that works, we need to think about, before we cover the retake itself, we need to think about once a brawl team is won, where are they going to hold? And the reality is a brawl team isn't actually going to get that aggressive in their hold. Yes, they'll hold up here to spam a little bit. They'll be like, yeah, we want to be able to do some spam. We want to poke into you a little bit in most situations, but they're highly aware of the sim TP play on retake, and then this is very similar to Control Center, how we talked about it, where, oh no, shoot, you beat us here, and now we're in trouble, and we have to push into you having the choke. We don't like that. So they're going to poke gently, but it's going to be real fast that they back off and go back to holding this. They're like, hey, if we can get some resources out of you, some health, some cooldown, some ult charge, great. But mostly this is where they're going to hold, and they're going to make you push into them, and they're going to have the advantage if this comp is being mirrored against each other. So what do if this comp is being mirrored against each other? Well, that's part of why in this version of the comp, for example, I've included Doomfist. If you're attacking into a mirror comp here, your Doomfist is doing some fishing. You're trying to roll the dice and go, oh, can we force an elimination? You're also going, hey, we're going to go ahead and send sim TPs past you. Maybe we're going to take the sim TP. Maybe we're going to bluff taking the sim TP. Maybe just sim is going to take the TP, and now we have a little bit of a flank on you, but she can leave whenever she wants. Those sort of things to try to soften up this hold, but really you're sort of going, hey, you guys won the first fight. It may take us a while to win another fight, but we will, even with your advantage, and then you'll have to go through the same thing to flip it back against us, and we don't think you're going to be able to. So that's one option. It's not my favorite thing in the world. It's not super strategically deep, but it is one option and it is pretty common. Again, if you're not seeing these exact heroes, don't worry about it. The concept is this is a brawl comp. You go into the brawl comp again, trying to fish for an advantage, trying to get them to over ult, and then you can ult and take it to the next one, whatever you want there. The reason that you don't see a ton of other things is because the way this map is designed, you don't actually have a ton. You don't actually have a ton that you can do in terms of kite distance. Let's say that you set yourself up with the normal solution to a brawl comp that is holding this is surrounding them, taking angles, and exhausting them, because they've given up map control in favor of objective control, and you should just be able to poke them from a bunch of different angles. Like, aha, I am going to poke you with my Hanzo from back here. But Hanzo doesn't have enough kite distance back here based on the distance before the edge of the map, so that doesn't work great for him. And the other issue that you run into is, oh, well, let's just set up a flyer out here. It's really hard to support a flyer out here, or even a flyer out here, or even a diva over here. It's hard to support these people on angles while you have your Zen Brig here, your Anna here. They don't really have good sight lines. And I can show you that if we've set up a diva here, a flyer here. My Zen takes a look at that and goes, what am I supposed to do? I can't help Diva. I can't get a Harmony Orb that far. Anna's in much the same boat. There's not a great ability to support that to let them sustain. And the Brawl comp, let's pretend it has a McCree, that's not remotely weird, just goes, oh yeah, we can handle you, and the BAP is either helping me handle you, is healing me as I handle you, no problem whatsoever. Your core still isn't willing to enter. Oh, there's a div out there, let's go push her, that sort of thing, make her leave. She didn't get to soften us up much at all before she had to leave. No, this team was not willing to go, yes, you're weak enough, we're going to push in and do this as you do that, because they aren't ready to break your choke yet until you're softer, if they're a poke or a divey type team. So that's what you look at, and that's why those comps don't see a ton of play. That said, it is doable. There are some ways to do it, and I've picked some of the heroes that are good for it for this. What you end up doing is setting something up along these lines. You don't necessarily have to go as deep as we did with the Echo there, but you can end up setting something like this up where you go, hey, we're pretty happy with this. Maybe you support with a Mercy, maybe you don't, but you do something like this where you go, we're going to use someone like this who can retreat quickly, who can self-sustain a bit, applying angular pressure. We're going to support our Echo as best we reasonably can. If these guys do try to chase someone down, we can threaten ball actually knocking them off the edge, and if they try to push our Zen, well, that's a problem, so our Zen's going to stay a bit further back, and our ball's also ready to disrupt that, slow that down a little bit so that Zen doesn't get punished, and obviously these guys would close angles if they did that. So that's doable. The problem that you run into if you run like, hey, the answer to the sim shenanigans, the brawl shenanigans on this is a heavy poke mobile comp or a heavy poke dive comp, is going to be that it still takes forever. Even for first fight, you're generally going, you might try to contest the point a little bit with ball, but you're mostly just accepting that these guys are going to beat you to point, and they're probably going to get the first cap. You just hope that the cap is only at 11%, 12% before you exhaust them enough that you're willing to go in hard and finish the fight. So that's not great. If they do win first fight, or if they win first fight against Brawl, and you swap into this comp for retake, understand and accept you're really only going to get to do this once. You're going to exhaust them down and be like, yep, we took you down, whatever, but it's probably going to take you 60-70% of the map percentage between them winning the first fight against your Brawl, them having ults, and you draining them enough that you're actually willing to fight them and beat them, and then doing so, that you're not really then going to be able to win another fight against them. And I don't mean, oh, you can't win another fight. I mean, if they win the fight and flip it again, you're not going to be able to exhaust them enough to exercise your win condition again. It's okay if you soften them up in the way in, soften them, and then they flip the point when you've been sort of gently contesting it, whatever, and then you go, okay, you flipped the point, you got another 6-8%, and then we immediately wipe you and take it out. But if they actually win a fight and flip it on you for real, you're not going to have time to exhaust them again. So that, again, totally playable like this, but this is why you see a lot of Brawl and why you see the variance that you do. There isn't really a like super strong position that gets ignored on the maps here that much. It's not like, oh yes, this is super strong and it gets ignored. Unfortunately, this portion of the map tends to not be relevant when people understand how to play this map or how it's played in the modern era. If people are matching out here, taking first fight out here, this is absolutely relevant. This is a lane. This gives you access to their backline. But if people are doing sim shenanigans, not so much. What is probably the most relevant is understanding we can soften it up from this angle. This type of angle is pretty good, especially with a flyer for doing it. Okay. Moving on. Full dive comp, yeah, basically has no place here. We talked about Brawl, we talked about poke dive hybrids. Full dive really doesn't have much of a place here unless it's in answer to a Brawl comp that like lost to a poke dive comp, then swapping into a Talon dive or a 6-man that then tries to take this out. Again, I'm not saying it'll never work for you when the opponents aren't playing the map sort of correctly, but when we look at the map, how it works, how sim TPs work, you're mostly not going to see that, at least until sim falls out of flavor. So then we move on to our third map, which is going to be Garden. And Garden has a few more interesting tricks up its sleeve. Garden is probably played the most standard. It's the least likely to have sim shenanigans. You can absolutely run into, hey, there's a sim TP here for respawns that makes flipping the point take absolutely forever. Just be fast about taking those out. Understand that once she's on point, once she has her turret set up, she is going to be a problem. Deal with her quickly. She doesn't change the game quite the way that she does on some of the other points, though. In terms of control center, where she totally changes how retakes work or how you defend against retakes, or on night market where she sort of says, nope, we're playing Brawl. Okay. So we get into Garden, and let's draw our lanes, because again, that's going to be important. You've got to understand your lanes to understand Overwatch. So the first lane, the standard lane, isn't really going to surprise anyone. It's going to be, oh, congratulations, we found a lane. Nothing too wild. Secondary lane, probably also not really going to surprise anyone, is going to be, oh, look, we found ourselves a path through White Room. So where's the third lane? Well, the third lane, when you're talking about the fight for this initial thing, is going to be Dojo. Dojo is underutilized. If you look at these flank routes and how much they take in terms of time, etc., you will find that teams pretty frequently understand the power of hey, let's say we're a dive comp, let's say we're a mobile comp, let's say we're a Brawl comp, a poke comp, whatever. Brawl comps will usually rotate in through White Room. The reason that they rotate in through White Room here is it mostly on first fight is going to limit the number of angles that they can be threatened from. No one is going to have circled behind them in time, so they mostly get to go, we're pushing up here, and even if we're up against a divey comp or a poke comp that beat us here, all the damage is going to come from one direction. We're pretty good at that, advancing with our Rhine Shield, with our Matrix, with our Sigma tools, whatever, to get in, and then we have a nice close quarters point to fight over. Other comps will tend to go this way, and in their tending to go this way, that's great. Most people at least have some understanding of a second lane is good. This is the obvious second lane. They'll send a tracer, a ball, whatever, to go here. Maybe they run into a flanker on the other team. If they don't, they come in here. They're threatening from here. Their team is threatening from here. Fantastic. We like that. That works. Don't get me wrong. This is faster. If you go, hey, if we're only going to win 2 out of the 3 lanes, if that's all we care about, we're going here. I'm going to break off. I'm going to go through here, and I'm either going to go like this or I'm going to go like this. And this is going to accomplish the same thing that this did, but it's going to get me into their backline, threatening them more quickly than this route did. Now, if your team really understands it, it might be they push core, your McCree goes and takes this lane, and like your Tracer pushes this lane. And that's even better. But if you're only going to get 2 lanes, don't forget that this exists, and this will give you faster backline access than this will. Which matters because you're going to have done enough work to make them showing up here later less relevant. Like, yes, you're surrendering the lane, but it's less relevant if you won your lane and used that to help win the fight first or get ahead in the fight. You're not going to fully win the fight before they show up from the 3rd lane here. Okay, let's jump back to here. Other thing I should mention, this is traditionally a flyer heavy point. You'll see Pharaohs and Echoes playing around this, able to spam into windows, able to spam into the point, making it very hard to re-advance on. That's definitely a doable thing. Don't underestimate that. But the one thing that you do want to be aware of is Widows from spawn can hit Pharaoh. So it costs almost nothing just dropping ult charge for either of the DPS to go, nope, and take out the flyer and swap back. And if they have the Mercy, that's a problem. If they have the other flyer, well, you can res them, but now you're down their res, and then they swap back to Tracer, swap back to Soldier, whatever, get back pretty quickly. So definitely something to be aware of, but yes, this is traditionally a Pharah-heavy map. So then we're going to get into future holds and retakes. So once a team has won this fight, we talked about how Brawl's first rotation will be through here. We talked about how other comps will generally take Garden side here of Gardens. Cool. Once a team is won, they're generally going to still hold forward and try to not let the other team in. And mostly they're going to hold forward over here because the defensive team has some nice boop advantages, don't want to let them in, and more comps do want to rotate this way than through White Room. Okay, cool. That works for us. We're going to defend this. Something I want both teams to be aware of. There is a 3rd lane. If you are defending this, now you look at this and go, Dojo's not a relevant lane. We look at this and go, here's main. Here's sort of the alternate lane. Dojo isn't relevant because we're holding here. Your 3rd lane of sorts is right here. It's deck. This works both for jumping across with some sort of flanker, some sort of tank, etc., or it works for posting a hit scan out here, a soldier, a Kree, whatever. Your team should still be able to support you from here while you have this nice angle. You don't just look at them 1 at 6 as 1 at 6 while defending while your team is behind cover, but once this team starts to round the corner, this is powerful. Do not underestimate this. This is your 3rd lane at this point in time, both for the attackers and for the defenders. That's where Hog lives to get environmentals. Yes, it is. So do not forget about this. This is relevant. This isn't used enough by either attackers or defenders, just like this isn't used enough by either attackers or defenders. If the attackers do break through this, then you get into a situation where the attackers are then very interested in this lane because the defenders will have pulled back a little bit. They'll have been like, oh, we're a bit in trouble. We're pulling back to point, whatever. And then you have a situation where, yes, you're attacking from here and you do want to rotate either a flanker or perhaps an off-angling poke aspect through here to go do work. And that is very powerful. Especially if you went, hey, we sent our flanker this way. We now had our poke aspect over here, has left the core to go over here, and core is continuing like this. That is going to be very powerful. Do not underestimate that. That's mostly what I think I want to cover for this map. Again, brawl comps or comps that have just gotten sick of the boop threat will frequently rotate this way. If a brawl comp does rotate this way, or even a non-brawl comp rotates this way, but doesn't try to establish multiple lane controls, the defending team does want to understand that while yes, they're going to spam this isn't like the first push. It is important that you get something to threaten this comp from another direction. And usually what that means is your flanker hopping across, rolling across, whatever, and showing up behind them. After they've rotated out of spawn and past, you go, no, 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 we're going to follow you, and we send something over here so that you have a threat that doesn't let this team just go, aha, our Rhine shield, our Sigma shield, our defense matrix lets us push unidirectionally like this. You say, no, we have a tracer over here. We have a ball over here, or we have a tracer over here. We have perhaps an echo over here that then hops back, perhaps an echo over here, as well as our comp threatening you from here. But that mostly covers it. That's covered sort of the retakes on each point, the holds that end up happening on each point for each team, why points get opened the way they do, comps that are reasonable, and I'm not saying the specific hero, but the types of comps that generally make the most sense on these points, as well as how you can potentially fight some of the comps that make sense. And then we've gone over some of the positions. Again, do not forget about this. This will help you in your games. Do not forget about Dojo. This will help you in your games. While we're at it, make sure that you are keeping in mind that this exists and is pretty good, both when you're holding something, when you're defending a point, either down people so you don't have time to push up, or against a team that has a sim and can threaten the TP, as well as basically nothing here, unfortunately. There aren't any terribly strong points to be aware of on this. So that's what I have for you guys today. We did it in 35 minutes. I was worried we'd go a bit longer than that. If you guys have questions about this map, Overwatch stuff in general, anything like that, do throw them up in chat. If you've enjoyed the content, please do drop a like and consider subscribing for more. Or if you have another map that you would like to see next, please leave a comment of that down below. And the one with the most comments for it or the most upvotes, maybe I'll do that one next. Okay, so I'm going to catch up on chat, and admittedly this chat started half an hour ago, so some of it's going to be playing catch up here, but we will get caught up. Crunch says, I'm a tad late, but the best way to beat Lijiang is round up the one remaining sim main in Overwatch before the enemy team does. Ah, control blue box and win the game. No, wrong map guide. Wrong map guide. Will you be doing these for every map eventually? I'm not going to commit to it, but yes. So I guess I just committed to it. Look, it's the one time sim mains can feel joy. Sim mains should just auto-queue constantly into each Lijiang to make them happier. Only if we can remove everyone else from the Lijiang queue. Probably, Dave. Probably. That and Hanamura. There's some value there. All teams scrambling all their budget together to find the world's last sim main. Dave says, bit off topic, but have you considered scheduling your streams like Contenders does? I'm sure you'd get more viewers from the start. I absolutely would get more viewers from the start, but there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing there, where it's like, if I'm going to schedule my stream, I'm going to get more viewers, but how do I put this? I'm going to get more viewers. Okay, if I schedule my stream, great. Cool. If I schedule my streams, I'm also going to do less streams. Because if I'm scheduling my streams, my schedule, my opportunity costs become higher, those sorts of things of like, if I putting my schedule down more in stone, my opportunity cost of other things that I can go do goes and becomes higher. That's okay if I'm getting enough viewership out of the scheduled streams. But I don't think we're there yet. I think we're still at a point where I want my average viewership to be higher before I move into scheduled streams. Scheduled streams are absolutely a possibility, and you could say, but temporal, this is a chicken or the egg thing. If you scheduled your streams, you'd get more viewership that would make scheduling your streams worth it to you. Or I can go, no, 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 I need more viewers before I can schedule the streams to make scheduling my streams worth it to me. I know, I get it. But yes, I have considered it. The other team is not running Symmetra. Literally just buy up the last sim main on Earth and you win. Blah is talking about Crunch having a sim friend who did that and climbed the ladder pretty quick. I'd love to see a game where the attackers just keep changing the way they enter every time they find the enemy team. I mean, you could do that. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. If you're just changing your rotation route, you are going to throw off how the other team holds a little bit. There are better and worse attack routes, but sometimes, Hanamura would be an example of this, you go and you don't take the optimal attack route just because the optimal attack route is so well defended. And even though you're like less likely to win on a suboptimal attack route, you sort of need the attackers to respect that the suboptimal attack routes exist in order to have a prayer on the optimal attack route. Your friend's at 3,900 on Sim. Nice, nice. He's the last inmate that exists. So really, your previous comments were just running promotion for him, trying to get him into Owl. I see it now. The third accidentally picks him and can't find the air switch button. Uh, Team's favorite activity on Night Market is to stand at the side entrance to point and wait for Lucio Ball to push them off, right? Yeah, the knockoffs are dangerous, both on this map right here, as well as on Night Market. That's part of, there's not kite distance really for a poke team on Night Market that is appropriately taking angles. That's part of the problem. And then Control Center, it would be relevant if you're playing around Mega, if you're playing Dive around Mega, really. But less relevant overall than some of the other King of the Hill maps. What do you do to deal with the Sim TP play is to tell the enemy team, Sim, the game will end if they win the round, and then the Sim will throw so they can play Lijiang one more round. Okay. Map is good for spawn camping as Ball 2. Lots of sneaky places to hide, and a big fat mega right next to spawn. Yeah, yeah. Aren't there really only two lanes onto point for this map? Like the very middle also has the two lanes, like I can see, though I might be blind. Oh, I should specify when I say this map, I mean market. Yeah, so when we go to market, which we can do, let me zoom here for a second. Market's down here. So when we go to market, I already drew lanes, but when you're referring to is very middle also has two lanes. No, no, no. If we're talking about here, there's the lane over here, there's the lane down mid, and then there's the lane here, which is sort of what you could think of for initial fight. The problem is everyone ends up TPing here, but even when everyone ends up TPing here, then you just go, okay, our lanes that are relevant become this and this, but you can make this more relevant. You can, of course, extend this, right? You can go like this. And if the other team is controlling mid, and they're actually controlling mid, well, they've gifted you this lane, and this can become a third lane. But yes, you could think of it as two lanes once you get to point like that. Right. Three, I guess, you could go and flank from the enemy side. Yeah. The lanes can change a little bit, just like they did on Control Center once you have control. Like you talk about the point lanes and they're a little different than the map lanes, but yeah. Garden, yes. Time for ball, Lucio Boop only. They're pretty good for that. They're pretty good for that. This one is probably my second least favorite in the map. Favorite map in the game, only beaten by Ilios Ruins. So I actually like the King of the Hill maps, especially when the King of the Hill maps, and I think Ilios is one of them. I like the King of the Hill maps that encourage different playstyles for all three different points, and Ilios does a good job of that. For example, you can look at it and go, hey, on well, you're looking at maybe you want to play some Orisa to halt people into the well, etc. So maybe you're looking at a poke boop comp, whatever. Then you get to something like, okay, now we're heading over to Lighthouse, and Lighthouse can get a lot more brawly. We can play that more brawly. Okay, cool. And then Ruins. Ruins has super long sight lines, but you're not going to use an Orisa on it. You're much more likely to go, can we sneak a ball around to go deal with Widows, a Winston around to go deal with Widows, things like that. Like, I like when it changes the way the game is played pretty significantly between all 3 points. Lijiang used to sort of feel like that, but eventually people figured out, wait, Control Center is the brawl map, but we can make this a full brawl map too. And we did. Because, we're going to go for the most optimal strategy. Okay. Okay, Gardens Comp, Hog, Lucio, Ball, Rat. Your goal is to poop everyone off. Right, right. Ruins, I would love an analysis of ruins because I don't know what to do on ruins. Okay, Crunch, we'll get to it. I like ruins. Matches on this map can be ever. Want to buy the DPS that switches to Widow and Spawn, eliminates the fair, and then goes about their day? I know. It exists, but not very common. You forgot to add to your Garden Comp Fair and Mercy. Sure, sure. Blaw's pointing out that the deck is where hogs live to get environmentals. Right, you can post a hog there, you can post a Kree there, you can have a tracer defend it against another tracer or go through it to challenge their team from behind as they advance. You can do some good stuff. You can tell straight from spot as well. 36 minutes. We need to trim this down to 27 post editing. I'll just put timestamps in here and then maybe they'll be happy. Curious what Temporal's favorite map in the game is. It is Gibraltar. Also love these more macro type vids. Excellent charge. Yeah, they're a little more back to my roots on YouTube. A little more back to my roots, even Stat Banana and all. But I also think it's just time to mix a bit more of them in. And I think they're useful. Like, I think my earlier macro stuff, while certainly useful, while certainly interesting, wasn't useful enough for the average ladder player. And that audience is simply much, much bigger than, well, how does this work in the pro scene, in contenders, in high level tier 3, etc. I think this is more useful in how we're tackling it, which doesn't mean I'm not going to do any professional level content, any macro, this is how the game should work, and it doesn't. This map even edges a little in the, well, this is probably how it should be played. I'm mostly doing that, though, because you do see it played this way on ladder. And I do cover how to handle the other comps, or what you can do if your team is playing the wrong comps, or maybe not the wrong comps, but at least not the most optimal comps into these, in terms of, hey, you can take angles on this one. You can control the mega on control center and then play around the minis as well with your dive comp. I would recommend Asombra if you're trying to play dive on control center because getting control of those packs is pretty relevant. Yeah, yeah. Temporal, when will you do a map analysis of Horizon Lunar Colony? Maybe never. Like, I might get to it, but Overwatch 2 is going to come out eventually and it'll be dropped. And let's be honest, it's already been dropped. It's not going to work its way back into the competitive pool. Least favorite? What's my least favorite? Ooh. One of the maps they removed. Um, probably, probably Paris. I'm okay with Horizon Lunar Colony. Yes, that first point is annoying, but it's workable. Second point is interesting. I actually like how second point was designed. I know that's controversial. Maybe I just like, hanging out on top of the thing at the top that moves back and forth, etc. But I would probably say Paris. Oh, the Rhine map where Temporal won his first game by position correct on Blueback's not what happened. Vote for Ilios. Vote for Ilios and Ruins as well. Okay. Do not vote for Ruins. Vote for HLC. I mean, I'll just ignore it. Here's how to play around a bad team is such a crucial skill for Overwatch. For ladder. Yes, yes. Chat help. You need to vote for Horizon Lunar Colony. Would you say that Night Market is a bad map for Reinhardt? Would I say that Night Market is a bad map for Reinhardt? No. No, I would not at all say that Night Market is a bad map for Reinhardt. Your pretty standard comp here on Night Market right now is going to be a sim TPing map, a sim TPing strat to window, and given that that is the standard open, again, I know that's right now, but given that that's a pretty standard open, that's pretty solid. It's also, even if sim isn't strat, even if sim isn't meta, like we could go back to a goats meta and say, oh, but we're playing goats. It's always got the difficulty of, this is a poor kite distance that people that are trying to poke from outside angles have if a brawl team tries to chase them down. And it's really hard, pretty hard for supports who basically have to, your flex support basically has to play out here to support poke aspects that are trying to play from out here, or dive aspects like Genji that are trying to soften the team up from out here. So it's always a reasonably strong brawl map. It certainly used to see more dive play than it does now, but it's not a terribly strong poke map in terms of how this works, in terms of what breaks up the sight lines, in terms of the short kite distances, and that makes it a good brawl map just by nature of if you're not terribly strong for poke, you don't have great high ground to stage to contest the point and get out. Like, aha, I'm tiptoeing on the point, and now I'm gonna leave, and I'll just jump away. Oh shoot, that's not good. That sort of thing. Like, that's going to make it good for brawl. What if you were determined to play Hog on Lijiang maps, on all Lijiang maps? Ooh, good question. If I had to play Hog on all Lijiang maps, I'm probably still going to do this. I'm probably still going to threaten this or threaten this rather than try to threaten main. It's possible that I'll let my Zen threaten here and I'll try to threaten here. It's possible, but I'm probably going to try to do this for retakes. I'm going to keep an eye open for the Doomfist type, perhaps for the Symmetra if she's TPing behind us and they don't have a Doomfist, but for the Doomfist type to shut that down, because shutting down their fishing is going to be a big deal. If I had to play this, obviously if you're on point, not a big deal. If you had to play this here, I think we've talked about, well, this is where you get your environmental limbs from. Yay! When you're holding defensively. When you're pushing in, you push in with core, and then you're perfectly happy to go play from out here, You're going to be happy to go take dojo. That's going to work for you. And then control center. The map with the tower. Got it. Reinhardt is passive. Well, I'll come back to it. I'm going to finish the hog question. And then when we look at here, if you're playing hog, I mean, that's not the end of the world. You're just going, hey, I'm going for shield break. You're not going to have good angles here, but you're going to go for shield break because of what we talked about in terms of this angle doesn't really help that much for first fight. Other angles are mostly too long or send weak characters through them. Hog is mostly just going to go here, contribute to the shield break. As soon as he sees an opening, he's going to bring someone into his team, crush it. And then after that, he's probably going to position up over here with, say, his Junkrat or instead of his Junkrat to control this angle while he has, a McCree controlling this angle, his Rhine here. If he's playing Hog with he's mostly just going to control this space, to be perfectly honest, even if he's playing with a dive comp. Sorry, I meant Reinhardt. Is Reinhardt good on the map with the tower? I think what you're talking about for map of the tower is going to be gardens here. It could be that, which is control center, which is in the tower, but this is gardens, and what we're looking at for gardens of is this a good Reinhardt map? It can be. It's not terrible by any means to play Reinhardt to go, hey, we're going to open. Our first rotation is going to be into White Room here. On first rotation, the team will not have had time to put a flanker back here behind us. It's possible that they'll send someone here, but we'll probably see them immediately and be able to push them back, or they'll have started to go in here. Then we push in, we get control of this. This is a nice close range brawl for us. We're pretty happy to hold angles, even with our Reinhardt out here, even against a more mobile, a more pokey, whatever comp. We're pretty happy to hold our angles. They're never going to push White Room against us because it's a feed. Like, they can send someone down White Room, but there will never be a real push from them with that. And we can just go, nope, we're poking you, we're doing our thing, but ultimately we're going to bring it back to point, and we're just going to use the terrain on point to protect us and force it into a brawl fight. They're, of course, going to try to soften you with a tracer from over here, an echo from over here, that sort of thing, but it's by no means a bad comp. It's by no means bad to play Reinhardt in a brawl comp here. Is the DM map loaded in this environment too? Is the DM map loaded in? Oh, no, I didn't load the DM map. I pulled this from Overwatch League because when I'm in the real replay viewer, as opposed to just spectating a custom game, I can jump between the maps like this. So if I'm in a custom game, I can't jump between the three. I'd have to actually go control the loading. Yep, all the maps, all of the King of the Hill maps are like this, where you can go surf between them if you understand how, and you're either handling a replay. You can't do it while you are spectating a game necessarily. Where would a sim want to put her turrets for something like Lijiang Garden? And in a general and a general rule for where we'd expect them in Lijiang. Well, I can't give you the general rule necessarily for where to expect them in Lijiang. I mean, I guess I can. I guess we'll go through garden. So we're here. If you're on garden, her turrets are going to be around point. She's going to go, hey, we got to point first. I have turrets here. I have turrets here. Maybe I threw a turret back here or a turret to guard window. Probably don't need it because something here will also guard window and isn't going to be broken before you come through window. Isn't going to be broken before you come through here. So these two doors angled in the direction of the opposing team, and then potentially something back here or potentially something on this as like a fallback of, oh no, you're chasing me. I don't like it, and then there's another turret that you have to turn and deal with type thing. That's what you'd expect here when she has control, and you'd expect her mostly to get control because let's be honest, she's Sim. She doesn't go, oh, let me rotate this way. She just goes, yep, I'm on point. In terms of the other points, the other ones we can jump up to control center here because we did include Sim in the thumbnail there. I think it's only fair that we cover her maps. She's generally going to throw turrets, something like here, here, or here, whatever. She's going to get two turrets over around this thing, and then I like to put one turret more over here, to be perfectly honest, but it's not the end of the world if you go three turrets around this thing. Some people will do them up here. I'm not the biggest fan of that because those are pretty easy to break. And then once you're holding for the retake, once you have control with Sim, again, you're looking at this in a, hey, now this is the main path I expect people to come down, and I'm going to have two turrets set up to control this, and maybe one turret over here to help with my Junkrat spam, or perhaps one turret out over here as a scouting turret. I'm going as fast as I can, guys. I'm flying between the maps. And then this is going to be a very similar principle where she's going to set up turrets that can mostly beam both of these things. She's aware that people are going to come through mostly these two things after the first push, so her turrets are mostly going to be set up like here. Two turrets that should threaten both directions pretty darn well, and then she's going to potentially be ready with a, okay, well, is there a flank route I need? Is there someone I actually need to be worried about coming in, and can I tuck my turret in such a way that spam isn't going to get this turret and break it? So something like here-ish if I'm worried about someone coming in from here. Why is pushing White Room versus Brawl feed? Where would Brawl team stage? Oh, if you try to push into White Room, we're talking about Garden there. If you try to push as your core, for example, your core of a poke team or your core of a dive team through White Room, the Brawl team is just going to go, wait, really? Like, okay, you're eventually going to walk through this into a Reinhardt that's standing right here, into, a Lucio that's hanging out over here, like into a Zarya Diva that's this. You're not going to be able to really poke them down because they're just going to stand like this when they have control. And then when you get close, or when you get close enough that they think they have you, you're against a basically full resource Brawl team. The only things that were wearing down the Brawl team was maybe you had a Tracer threatening here, an Echo threatening here, something like that, and that's not going to be enough to really wear them down. They need more pressure on that to wear them down. And if they think you get vulnerable, like if you start to walk up here, they might go, yeah, that's enough, pop speed amp and just run you down and take out your Brig Zen, your Anna Brig Sigma, whatever you've got as your core. And even if you've got like an Orisa and you're like, no, we're a full poke team, and standing here we have an Orisa plus a Diva plus McCree, so we've actually got some things that we're not terrible at a brawl. No, they're still going to beat you if you come in here and you've got nowhere to retreat. Like, yes, you could try to retreat spreading out like this, but they're going to just go, we'll chase through and finish you over here where that angle isn't relevant, or, okay, fine, you left, we'll go back and we'll control point again. Yeah, no problem, Dave. I hope that answers your question, Charge on CD. If anyone else has questions, go ahead and throw them up now. If you guys are enjoying the content, please do drop a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Uh, yeah, yeah. And again, if you guys have like, hey, this is the next map I want, you can leave something in the comments there. And I'm not seeing anything else there, so I think we will go ahead and call it there. Thanks, guys. Temporal.